I try not to go to Diop too much, but his model is very good for understanding difference between Africans and Europeans. We we don't understand the depth of the spiritual difference. Mama Rumba's Yurugu is very instrumental in understanding that this isn't just some surface, superficial cultural thing that distinguishes us from them. This is extremely deeply rooted. One way that we test this, or one way this could be tested, is if you take, in psychology, you take a child out of their environment. Let me go back another way. If you have twins, identical twins, not fraternal twins, but if you have identical twins and they were separated at birth, and they grow up and then they're tested, and they will find that there's some very similarities in their IQ, stuff like that, even though they were raised in different environments. So it doesn't change even though the environment may change. When you look historically at them, you see patterns, and those patterns don't change. They understand who they are. They understand what they're about, even if it's at a subconscious level, and they act accordingly. The same thing with us. The problem is we've been in their company, if you will, under their oppression for so long that we have lost that. I say they are what they are. They are who they are, and that's not gonna change. And that's where the confusion kicks in. We think that they have become something different because they smile at us now. We think that we're dealing with a different kind of people, if we want to say people, because they smile at us now, because they'll give us larger crumbs now. We don't get that they're always going to be who they are. The genocultural part is very difficult for people to understand, because some things in science you have to assume. If somebody hates you, and this may be a bad example, but if somebody hates you, you can tell. It's pretty obvious. I might not be able to prove that on paper. I might not be able to do an experiment to prove that. I remember being in a class on racism taught by William Jewis Wilson, who was like the Negro's Negro. He wrote a book called The Declining Significance of Race, where he was making the argument that race is irrelevant, that it's all about class. I was in his class and I was making a point about white racism relative to a book by Elliot LeBeau called Tally's Corner. He said, prove it. I don't see any racism. You can feel it to me. There are things that you can feel. I might not be able to scientifically prove it, but I know it because I can feel it. So we look back over time, we see that same consistent pattern with them. They everywhere they go, everything they've done. You always use the example of everywhere they've gone, they have murder. Everywhere they've gone, they've created this buffer class between them and the quote unquote natives. Everywhere they've gone, one of the things that I will tell people when they're trying to really get a grip on it, I said, when you look at them, watch them, first thing they're going to do, they're going to assess when they see somebody new is whether you're friend or foe. That's the first question in their mind, whether you're friend or foe. And that isn't something that they have a conversation about. So the guy in Sacramento is not on the phone with the guy in Boston saying, we need to do this. Okay. The guy who's in Seattle is not calling up the guy in Tallahassee asking him, should we charge black women more for dry cleaning, their blouses than, white women? They automatically know. They're having a conversation. They're having a conversation online. They're having a conversation in the movies. They're having a conversation in the shows. We're there for entertainment. They're communicating with each other. They're telling each other what they need to do, what they need to prepare for, how they need to prepare for it. We're just being entertained. So it's like because what is working against us is that I can't sit down and scientifically show you how they are racist in this particular way, or that this is their way. And that's, I guess, a point that Bob E. Wright, one of our most profound minds, this is the one point where I differ with him on. He limited the psychopathic racial personality to a select group of Europeans, if you will. It's just a matter of ability. It's a matter of opportunity. So when I'm looking at them, I see a pattern that's in a people. When I see or hear of one who is doing things that don't fit into that pattern, it's like, to me, well, that's okay, that's a closet European. They just either don't know it or they're still using that to manipulate us. We just don't realize it, because when you have people in such desperate, dire straits that they'll take assistance from anyone, and we, being who we are, we connect what's done to or for us to that person. We've had a lot of great minds who had perverted ways, who were mental to the core. And they said some phenomenal, incredible stuff, and they taught us things that maybe we didn't know before. The problem isn't that, and I'll listen, but the problem isn't that. The problem is that we connect the quality of that person's character with what they said. And in the West, the tradition of lying is so strong, and we bought into it. We become them to the point where we can disconnect that. That's not our tradition. Okay? You want to become, or you were in the position to become the leader in the community. Well, then the first thing that was assessed was your relationship with your wife, with your children. Okay, you can have all the abilities in the world, but for us, character is most important. And you see that pattern too. You see it in Ma'at, you see it all of the writings, all the behaviors, what was valued. You see that in the person in the community who was the most valued person in the community was the one who gave the most selflessly, without expectation of return. That was our measurement of the good person, the righteous person. You see it through all of the Kemetic writings with that value. So we don't do that, but now we do. And we do that because we have become them. So that, and you see this, this is a major long conversation, but you're seeing it in their children. I'm seeing lying and cheating and plagiarizing first, second, third graders. You're seeing it. So it's going down. And when it moves like that, then it reaches a point where this is us, because we don't know anything else. So if you come to the children with something that's African, character is supposed to be this and good, they're looking at you like you're crazy, because they're not us anymore. That doesn't mean they can't be reversed, but when you're in this reality, a reality which glorifies being able to trick people, being able to steal from people, being able to use people. Usually with teens, I'll tell them when they want to know, when they want to understand, I'll say, get you a copy of the Teachings of Ptahhotep and Machiavelli's The Prince. I said, read the Teachings of Ptahhotep first, though. Then read, because you don't want to read Machiavelli and then read Ptahhotep through European eyes. When you look at those two books, even though they're small examples, they're profound in terms of their ability to show you the difference between the values of Europeans and the values of Africa, and that hasn't changed. And there would be no reason for them to change. This is what we don't get. They're in charge. So if I'm in charge and what I have used to get in charge is effective in keeping the people I need to keep under my foot, why would I change? It wouldn't make any sense to change. So they haven't changed because there's no need for them to change. They just understand, they understand numbers. They understand that they're outnumbered in a major way. So they can't just go and wipe out the entire African population like they've wiped out other populations, but they can't wipe out the entire population. So you go through a process of attrition where you kill some, you incarcerate some, you make all of them intercidal, of course, but you go through a process where gradually the ones who are left are most like you. The ones who are left defend you to the death. Then you become the norm. Then you become correct. Then your way then you can become truly who you are, which is what's going on now. Years ago, when I talked about the sex imperative, I would say we're in school, we're in sex education school. What we don't know is that we're only about maybe the 4th, 5th grade. if we're talking about going on through a grad degree, in terms of what they do and how they think about what they do. But they're moving us through the grades rapidly. Pornography and what's encased in their pornography. They're sadly, but most of what they're doing we don't see. We don't have the slightest idea. And they introduce it to us when we get to the point where we are enough like them at that level where we can, where it becomes us. So if we just look at this sexually, there are things that we were being introduced to in the 60s and 70s that were really alien to us. Now those things are gone and they've introduced us to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. If they had tried to introduce sadomasochism to us in the 60s, if they had tried to introduce this homosexuality thing, failure to us back in the 60s and 70s, we'd have gone off. If we had known what they were about when they came to the continent, that they were after our children's parents, they would have never gotten in. Regardless of the resources, all the rest, they'd have never gotten in because of how we value children, how we value family. But now that they have beat us out of ourselves, they have ripped us into unconsciousness. Now that has occurred, we're running to defend them. So that to me speaks to that, what I call that genocultural thing, where it's genetics encoded culturally over time. If you have a certain behavior, a certain trait that starts at the beginning of a people and it goes from generation, pretty soon it's going to become normal. I can't prove genetically that it did, but I'm of the opinion that over time, these things get incorporated into your genetic structure. Just like we're talking about that post-traumatic slavery syndrome, where we're talking about that has become genetically encoded. If these things can become genetically encoded, then who you are, how you look at the creator, how you see other people, that xenophobia, fear, hatred of others, that becomes part of you. That's how you look at the world. It wasn't just that we were oppressed, that in our community, even to this date, in particularly small black towns, small southern towns, or small black towns, or parts of towns in the South, you don't speak to me, it's like you're saying, let's fight, you're an enemy. You better speak to everybody on the street, whether you like them or not. That, of course, has declined. I could talk about this for hours. There was a 60-minute show, and when I was coming up, 60 Minutes was like a main news outlet. There was one episode where they went and looked at this small European town which had been very little influence from outside. And I say all the time, you want to find out what African people are really like, go to the rural places that have been least touched, which becomes fewer and fewer and fewer. But they went to this town and they were, interviewing people, looking around, taking pictures. And the things that they noticed, that these people looked down, they never smiled, they didn't talk to each other. They were mean and aggressive in this laid-back, aggressive type way. And the first thing clicked to me, that's them. It hasn't been touched. Now they've learned how to color it. It's like when I say that they communicate with each other. So they went through this thing in the media where everybody was crying, everybody was showing emotion. So they're teaching you, this is how you're supposed to be if you're going to be human, if you're going to deceive people. That rhetorical ethic, remember, he talks about where the first thing they do is they come in and they assess your idea of character. They assess your idea of spirituality. They assess your idea of and they pretend to be that. This is how systematic it is. They pretend to be whatever you are so that you become disarmed. And once you're disarmed, then they do what they were going to do to you in the first place. They still do that. That hasn't changed. We live in a house that's in the center of one of the major areas of regentrification in Atlanta. And I wrote an article on this. I think it's in Clarity. Well, the first thing they do, and I've seen it in DC, first thing they do is they come in and they smile and they wave and they drive by and they'll walk by and they'll be like super nice and all the rest is trying to see who's friend and foe. They learned real quick that I was foe. And they communicate. So after, I guess about a month of that, none of them, and I hadn't seen all of them, none of them would speak. The next stage is when they begin to buy houses in the area. You might see them at the grocery store, you might see them driving by, but they're not out in the open. After that, when they reach a critical mass, then they turn on you. Then you get to see what they're really about because then they're in charge. It's their space now. So that pattern is all over. If this wasn't the case, what did they say, 5 to 7%, when black folks reach 5 to 7% in a predominantly white neighborhood, then there's white flight. That was, they discovered this in the 60s and 70s. It still applies. It still applies. So the image control for these folks is super critical. And if you were being you, then you don't have to, you don't have to put on the front. You don't have to study other people to see what they're about, what they're like. And again, I firmly believe that that is something that gets passed on. It becomes part of your genetic structure. And if I'm correct, then this is what has occurred in ours as well. I remember Enia saying that when she was young, and it wasn't so much when I was young, because I came up in DC, so it was a little more advanced. She came from very, very small rural Mississippi, and she said when she was coming up, she said they understood that white folks were morally corrupt, and they looked down at them in a way because of this, and they took pride in the fact that we were morally righteous, that we acted like human beings toward each other. But now we don't know that. You look at the generation now, they have, through that school, they have become more like that. They have become an imitation of that in order to become successful, to survive, to succeed, to live in this world. When we were at the University of Chicago, every year they had a colloquium, which, food, wine, people get together, but it was for the black students at the University of Chicago, black graduate school students there. And we, I guess we'd been there maybe 7, 8 years and didn't attend that stuff. So we decided to go to that year's. And we walked in, and the first thing I noticed, the guys were over here and the women were over here. And it was, like a first grade kindergarten dance. Everybody's afraid to talk to each other. She went to talk to some of the fellas. I went to talk to some of the women. And as the conversation went on, and they knew who we were, because there was like so few of us, they knew, okay, you guys are like most advanced grad students here, you've been here, you survived the longest. And I asked them, I said, why are you all doing this? Why is the women over here and the men over there? And one of the sisters looked at me, she said, what men? She said, what men? I said, okay, well, let me take my leave, go over to see what's going on over there. And I went over to talk to the guys, and say, hey, how you doing? Hi, how you doing? And I got upset. Enia and I left, went back, came back, and my friend who was a grad student at Jimmy Shiner went down to his wife's room, and he said, no, they're not homosexuals. They've been effeminized. And then it began to register. In order for you to survive in their world, in a world where they see you, Chris Welsing, a whole bunch of other folks, they see you as a threat just because you're a black man. Then you have to adjust yourself to be less than them, so they feel less threatened in order to have access to this. And every single one of them. So it's like they haven't changed. We've changed to adjust to them. It's like you look at a child looks at mom or dad's face to read their expression to see if they should or should not be doing this. This is what we've been doing to them all of these generations. And now it's reached a point where you almost can't tell the difference between us and them. When I was a child, you could clearly tell the difference. If I saw a man of half a block away, I could tell you that's a black man from his walk. If I saw a black woman half a block away, I could tell you that was a black woman from her walk. Now it's like you can't. Conversation, what's talked about, how it's spoken, the words, the language, the accent. We have, at least those of us who have become quote unquote successful, you see that major change. They haven't changed. We have. They haven't changed one iota. They've changed tactics, they've changed strategies, they have all that, but they haven't changed. They're still exactly who they are. We're the ones who have changed. And I thought up the word your reason really immediately after I came across a proverb saying the first time that reasoning is the shackles of a coward. So, for African proverbs, you got to stop and think. You can't just keep right on rolling. You have to stop and think. And I'm saying, okay, that's where we have professional Negroes whose job it is to come up with so many excuses as to why something can't be done that it doesn't get done. So you spend days and days and days, weeks and months and years reasoning why it can't be done. And I need to clarify that because in the Rasta community, reasoning is a positive thing. You're having a conversation because you're trying to reach a higher level of understanding. Your reason, to me, really describes our mental side in terms of the thinking process where we've come to the point where we're using European logic, we're using Machiavelli to interpret the world. We're African, but we're using their reasoning, European reasoning, your reason to understand what's going on. Which to me is, that's complete. If somebody's walking down the street and they're talking to themselves and they're fighting in the wind and they're hollering and screaming, you say, something's kind of wrong with that guy. Keep your distance, stay away from him for a while. And we say that person's crazy, but if we're thinking out of the mind of Europeans, that's seen as normal. That's insane. If you're not thinking out of your own mind, if you're in hate of your own ancestors, nobody does this. Nobody's running away from their traditions. And any people who's come to power, they've always kept their traditions close. Always. We're the only people on the planet who are in hatred of our traditions, who are in hatred of our ancestors. There was a incident that it still, shakes me when I think about it, where this sister, dark-skinned sister, beautiful, and it's like to say beautiful and dark-skinned are like, there's something odd. Beautiful dark-skinned sister, like my grandfather on my paternal side, that blue-black, velvety. She was upset with her enslaved ancestors, and this was during a conversation about our enslavement. She was upset about her ancestors during our enslavement because they hadn't presented themselves or made themselves more presentable to the slave monster so that they would be raped so that she would be lighter. But that was, and she was like, and nobody freaked out about her comment. It was like, okay, I get her, I get how she feels. But to even have that as a possible idea in your head, that of course, since you're black, you're ugly. Since you're in the darker you are, the uglier you are. But to even have that idea in your head that would have been a positive for your ancestors because it would have benefited you, that to me is like the worst of the possible reason. Okay? So even though we may not use their theories, it's the way that we interpret reality, the way that we interpret our condition through somebody else's eyes. Your reason is whenever something goes on with us, we're always finding a way to blame us. Your reason is whenever there is a situation where there's a breakout of a fight between black people and white people on a wharf over something that white people did, then one of the first comments that you see was, but the white guy there, he helped. That's your reason. That's the logic that we carry. And we're not, that's the subconscious. We're not consciously saying, okay, well, how can I benefit white folks here? No, it's just automatic. We knew back in the 70s, if you want to become famous, if you want to make a lot of money, save a European's life. You'll be on Oprah, everybody everywhere. We weren't constantly thinking about that. But if the opportunity availed itself, that was something that we needed to jump on. Okay. So we don't do certain things, or we don't behave in certain ways. And people talk about the difference between when a European comes into a meeting of black folks, or a black person comes to a meeting of Europeans, the response is different. We know, but even the most diehard Negro, that individual back here knows that Europeans are killed for nothing. So they know they're directed by that thought in terms of the things they might consider to do or how they analyze things. Because the last thing they want to do is to have Europeans respond to them negatively. You get a slave mentality where slaves don't ask questions because you don't know what the response is going to be, and the response in all probability is going to be bad and it's going to hurt. So you don't even think to ask questions. That doesn't come out. And then, of course, you get to the point where we're at today, where we have not taught our children about the psychopathically racist way of Europeans, but we've taught them to aspire to success behaving like Europeans. So you're having this, our children are getting slapped and knocked down because they don't understand who they're dealing with. They think that racism doesn't exist. So they're approaching it like they don't exist, and then the European response is a European, and they don't understand. They'll get into an encounter with a cop and they'll think, oh, I'm a U.S. citizen. And they don't understand. They're the target, they're the threat. It was a news story, I believe, where this young black man, he was maybe 15, 16 years of age. This cop had him up against a car and had his elbow under his neck. On the other hand, he had a gun pointed at his head. The guy standing like, what? What you gonna do? What you gonna do? I said, you don't know who you're dealing with. Because we've taught them a lie. We've taught them that this is America. We've taught them that this is safe for them to be who they are or who they feel like being. They don't understand that threat is still there. They don't understand that they are still, the hunt is on and brother, you to pray. They don't understand that. They think that, it's like we expect science to be self-correcting. We don't expect science to be political. We expect science to be self-correcting. So even the racist ways of science is somehow going to correct itself through proof, through evidence or time. They don't understand what they're dealing with. And it's hard to explain to people because as the attrition of those who want to challenge the system occurs, as more and more of them fall by the wayside and more of what remains is user-friendly for Urugu, for Europeans, they don't understand this process that's going on. They're acting like everything is fine and that we'll get there. We can marry some of them and all the rest of this and everything will be fine. They don't understand until it slaps them in their face personally. But when Katrina hit and the two brothers wanted to get back into their integrated community and they're getting shot at by their white neighbors. Because white neighbors understand. They understand they were the threat. And to me, that's the outcome of this if more of us don't wake up or if those who are woke don't do certain things. The outcome of this can be extremely bad for us. There's nothing, and I know I've heard this before, but there's nothing in the universe that says African people can't be re-enslaved. We pull out our ancestral wisdom that, you don't kill all of the enemy. And we hear Negroes saying that, but you don't kill all your enemy. But Europeans, they don't operate on that same principle. You can go through a list of peoples who they have removed who no longer exist. It's not going to be a Jurassic Park thing where they pull out some blood from a mosquito and recreate these people. No, they're gone. They're permanently gone. They'll never, ever, ever walk the face of this planet again. And I could go on and on about how we don't teach our children these things not because we're afraid for them, we're afraid for us. What's going to happen to us if we don't lie to our children. We don't miseducate, don't diseducate our children. We're not afraid for the children. We're afraid for us. So there are things that our children should know about them, and now that's being whitewashed. There are things that our children should know about what they have done to us, about how we got here. Whether you're talking about whether we were already here or how we got here, whatever the case may be, there was travesty of an unbelievable magnitude. It doesn't even fit in the category of criminal behavior. It's way beyond that. I always use the example of a movie that was based on a Stephen King book called The Dead Zone. But in this dead zone, this guy was in a car accident, and he was in a coma for however long years, what have you, and he came out of the coma and he was semi-crippled. But he discovered that he had the ability to tell people's future, what's going on, just by touching them. That horrified him, that he had this ability, because, why? His old girlfriend, who was now married, had children, was campaigning for this guy who was running for a local political position and had, aspirations to become president of the country. They came to his door, she recognized him, and then she introduced him to this guy, and he shook his hand, and he saw this guy, if he became president, he was going to start a thermonuclear war. It was killing everybody. Would kill everybody. So he said, oh, that's why I have this power. That's why I'm here. I'm supposed to stop this guy. So the guy was going to be doing a speech at a local church, and the guy with the power, he got a rifle, got up on the, in the back to have the upper pews, hid up there. People started coming in. The guy came in. The politician was, talking to people, shaking hands, blah, blah, blah. The guy got his rifle, pulled out, aimed at him, and somebody saw him say, gun, gun. They shot him, and he fell off the balcony. He wasn't dead yet. He fell off the balcony, he's laying there. The woman who, had been his girlfriend way back when, she, reached over lovingly, and she touched him, he touched her hand, and he saw the guy didn't win the presidency. And then they show you why. When somebody said gun, the child that he was holding, he put it in front of him, and that picture made the news. And I say, that's us. We're putting our children up in front of us to protect us from Urugu. We're sacrificing our own children. People sacrifice your children, you keep your children behind you, protected. You don't put your children out in front, let Urugu do whatever they want to do to them, turn them into whatever they want to turn them into so that you can be safe. That's exactly what we're doing. That's the way of punks. That's not a way of strong people who believe in themselves, people who love themselves, people who love their children. You're supposed to be here to protect your children. And we're doing exactly the opposite. That's your reason. I have to start out with Maafa being a word that Mbani coined, meaning the Great Destruction. A lot of people confuse it. A lot of quote-unquote scholars confuse it, and they limit it to our enslavement in this country. To me, the Maafa began when the first African was touched, and it's still going on today. It's still escalating. It hasn't stopped. The Maafa, the definition of the Maafa is the longest endnote in my books. It's the longest one, and it doesn't begin to touch the tip of the iceberg in terms of what they have done, because most of what they did, they didn't write. This is where I tell folks all, you gotta use your imagination. You know who you're dealing with. You have to use your imagination in terms of you having an insane mind with a captive audience. They can do whatever it wants to this audience. What you're seeing them do to these women in there, captive women, this is just what you're seeing, what you're allowed to see right now, that school that you're in. I don't even know where to begin with the count to just from the point of capture to the point where we arrived here. Now we're going to talk about the hundreds of thousands in the process of collecting us to bring us here, which so many people are in denial about, which very much serves to exonerate the European. If this didn't happen, then they didn't do this. Then what are we upset with them about? Okay? I'm not talking about what happened during the time of our enslavement, what happened during Jim Crow, after. I'm just talking the K-Buka focuses on from the point of capture to the point of arrival. And K-Buka is very special to me. And the word itself, K-Buka, I got from Baba Fukiao, who's Kikongo. And I wanted a term that wasn't Sankofa. Everybody's seen Sankofa, and we need to expand our vocabulary. K-Buka is very special to me because of what it did to me. If you write then you know that you have to re-edit and re-edit and re-edit and re-edit. So any book that I've written, it's going to be reread in its entirety at least 30 times. You live your book. You live what you write. So, and at that time, Kebuka was the smallest book I had written. The day that Kebuka left here to go to the printers, my nervous system gave out and I couldn't walk. I ended up in the hospital for a minute, brought me back home, and I talks about I was laying across a coffee table for 3 weeks. I was out of the class for 3 months. I couldn't move. I couldn't do, anything. And one of the elder sisters came over and she said, the ancestors carried you through this process because they needed this done, but then when it was over, they needed to let you go so you could, find your way back to where you need to be. That was the most painful time of my life. I've had, surgeries, but that was the most painful time in my life. I literally became addicted to oxycodone. First time I experienced that withdrawal thing, it wouldn't let me go. That scared the living daylights out of me. In addition to the fact, I'm afraid I'll never walk again because my legs weren't working. The impact of what happened to our ancestors that we are afraid to even look at, that we're even afraid to even touch the surface of. We don't want to talk about anything of that horror because we know what that'll do in terms of our interpretation of them. So we put all our energy into denial that this occurred, and we embrace ideas and theories and lies about this not happening, that it's not a possibility. Leopold murdered over 10 million Africans. At one point in time, in one little African country that they, of course, cordoned off, but one little African country, he by himself, 10 million Africans. Double, even though now they're up to 6 million. There were 3 million when I was young. European Jews. I'm always trying to figure out how to make this clear clearer to black folks. Malcolm said, make it plain. So I remember teaching at Morehouse and realizing that they would not understand numbers in the hundreds of millions. So I came to the idea and I drew a silhouette of the United States on the board and I divided it into fists and I erased 4 of the fists, and that's how many of us. Calculations went on further, and a few years later, I erased the whole thing. I said, this is how many of us. I wanted to create I guess about a 10 by 5 foot map of the world, full of little PDIs, little holes where there will be lights that will go off over however long Europeans have been on the planet, showing you where they had murdered. So you could watch this moving thing with them moving around the world, murder people because the lights would go on and off as they move wherever they were. And different color lights would mean millions or hundreds of thousands or what have you. So you could get an idea of them as they spread around the world and the damage that they did, the number of people who they murdered. I couldn't even begin to, S.E. Anderson said 280 million from the, that point of capture to, arrival here. I argue it's somewhere between there. John Clark said it got to start at 100 million. So it's somewhere in there. We can't fathom those numbers though. We can't understand what that means, because if you did, you understand that's why Christianity had to be beaten into us, because if it wasn't in the way that it was, okay, because there's nothing, it's based on moral principles. Okay, my mother's Christian, I'm not even gonna say anything about, she serves people. Somebody's hungry, they're getting fed. Somebody needs clothes, they're getting clothes. I'm talking about Eurocentric Christianity. We had to be fed that so that we would forget. You come into my house and you murder my wife, you're in charge. I have to figure out a way to be able to deal with that so that I don't kill you and then I spend my life in prison over that. I have to figure out, so you're talking about hundreds of millions of people watching your daughter get, okay, watching somebody take and put it through a woman comes out of her mouth and then using her for practice. Using children for saying run and then, you know, awarding each other on who can shoot however many children. Removing an entire people. Having a woman's husband, his head, a rope and having her wear that rope around her neck. We can't fathom the ugliness inside of those minds, whose whole existence and reason for being centers around sadism, centers around giving pain because I can hurt people. That's a measurement of my, you know, my worth. Turning the world into me so that I become the norm and become the best. So in terms of numbers, listen, that's just one little place, one little person at one particular point in time. You remove virtually the entire population of this country. Slowly but surely, you remove virtually every person in this country and Canada. And you did it joyfully. You remove the entire buffalo population virtually in order to starve them to death and to run a railroad across this country. I had the students, Runoko Rashidi's got a number of good articles on his site, and I have the students calculate, as well as in the islands, average lifespan in Haiti from point of arrival or birth was 7 years. You got worked to death, 7 years. That was on Haiti. 7 years. But I have the students calculate, because they'll give the number of indigenous people on the island of Haiti. They'll give you the number when they arrived and the number when they were through. With New Zealand, Australia, Tasmania, they'll give you the number upon their point of arrival and they give you the number when they were finished. And you have the students calculate how many they make per day. And in some places it's in the thousands. You know, per day. How do you fathom? It's like you go through a town and you systematically kill everybody. And you go to the next town, and you go to the next, and you do this for year after year after year after year after year. Everywhere you go. Everywhere you go. There's no place that they went that they didn't do that. Genocultural mind at work. They do the same thing today. How many black women got sterilized in Kenya a number of years ago? And they're still doing it. That hasn't stopped. That just made the news. So we're talking about numbers. We're talking about those that we're aware of. These are uncountable numbers. You don't even get a chance to tell people exactly how many numbers are that you know. Let's know the numbers that, you know, maybe beyond your imagination. The number of Africans who were not born as a result of them. Europeans know that. They're crystal clear on that. That's one of the reasons why they target our children. You child before they had a child. Whole generation is gone. Because we grow exponentially. That whole generation is gone forever. And you do that to enough people over time, then the population begins to decline. Just like in China when they were going through their population control thing, you know, telling people one child each, and you begin to gradually see the change. Same thing's going on with us, been going on with us. They're attacking our children. Something made me cry. This young man sent me a letter. He was locked up. I believe he was like 25, 26. And he wrote me this letter like, it was his dad. He was right in that way. And he said, can you tell me about women? He said, I've never been with a woman, but I know what I see here is not right. He had a life with no parole. So his generations are gone. They know that. This is systematic. And in these things, we're caught in a twilight zone of who's at fault. Because you only have two choices, either looking at the numbers, either we are biologically, innately criminal, as someone said in one of the sociology books, the black person who, all black people are criminals, and the only black people who are free are the one who haven't been caught yet. So either we are innately criminal, or the system is criminal. And we don't dare look at the system as being criminal. So we rationalize that all these black people who are in prison, the explosion in the arrest of juveniles, that prison to school to prison pipeline, an explosion. I talked about a statistic a while back, which I'll say mentally brought me to tears because of the idea that you could even conceive of asking the question where somebody did a statistical analysis of the probability of you ending up in prison from birth, from the second that you came out of your mother's womb. The probability, and the probabilities, of course, are enormous for us as compared to them, both men and women. To even conceive of the idea of asking that question speaks to the situation, number one, but it speaks to the normalcy of which we can talk about the Maafa destroying us. It's like the acceptable levels of poverty, acceptable levels of black murder. It's assumed that this is going to happen. It's assumed that it can't stop. And of course, you have the Negroes in there using the reason, well, first thing come out their mouth, we kill each other. That's the first thing you're going to hear every time. We kill each other. We kill each other. We kill each other. Why are you blaming them? And they don't, not the density, but they don't have the insight. Their minds have been turned so much inside out that they can't look at structural causes. They can't look at the mind of a people. They can't understand this is what they have done. That they practice, as John Clark said, this is what they did to themselves. They practiced on themselves before they came out into the world. And they, of course, are going to treat family better than they treat enemy. So they're killing each other. They're starving each other. The percent of single female-headed families in this country, is this country or us? The percent of single female-headed families in this country, in our community today, is the same as it was in traditional European society. It hasn't changed. It hasn't modified. It's just now it's impacting us greater. And of course, we get blamed for it. Our women are immoral. Our men are weak. We don't do what we need to do. Or you, of course, somebody who's trying to impress upon people the idea that we do have some responsible black men. See, here's a black family. How do we get to the point where a black family is an anomaly where you have to show somebody, okay, here's a black family. Here's what a black family looks like. It's that bad. But we're trying so hard not to look. We're walking around with those blinders on, trying so hard not to look, praying that AK hits that person and not us. If I can just keep, and the denial is incredible. I have a relative who I was in a very short conversation with, and I used the word enemy to describe Europeans, and that person visibly cringed. They visibly cringe at the idea. So the analysis of anything that happens to us by that person is going to remove them from blame. I remember a person saying, when I was talking about the numbers of us compared to what happened to European Jews, he said, well, pain is pain. How do you even make that kind of a comparison? But that's that reason, that Negro mentality, where no matter what, you can't blame them. No matter what, you can't look at them. No matter what, you must forget, must forgive. The unforgettable and the unforgivable. If I could impress upon people anything, the Maafa didn't begin with our capture. And the Maafa is far from over. It has become so much more sophisticated, it's not funny. The Maafa has taken on proportions we can't even imagine because we have been trained to each other in service to Europeans. Righteous rage. It is, of course, it's an old combination of words, but I started using it because, and I want to say about 10 years ago maybe, you had warriors who were beginning to question their motives. Negroes are smart. They began to question their motives because Negroes were saying, oh, you're just angry. You need to let it go. Look at this messing up your whole life. You're so angry. You're so angry. You need to stop being so angry. And that, of course, is taken out of political context. You shouldn't be angry, okay? Somebody slaps my wife, I'm going to, what, just calmly, why did you do that? No, you have these emotions for a reason. So for me, righteous rage is important politically because it gives them a space that says what I'm doing is right for divine reasons. Because this is against divinity. This is against spirit. What you have done, if we are, as so many argue, vessels that spirit is in and allow spirit to do things it needs to do here, then, and spirit is everywhere. So it's connected to us through skin, whatever. We're all part of this, right? If that's true, then what happens to us happens to spirit. So if you slap me, spirit feels that. If you me, spirit feels that. So what they have done, they have created ruptures in spirit. They have done damage to spirit. We don't want to get to that. In fact, we don't even want to hear that it happened, but we definitely don't want to get to that. If we are that, it's like we selectively use our logic. Okay, we're vessels for spirit, but it's still different. It's still something separate. No, if it's you, it's you. Okay, so I'll be writing sometime and I'll look back at something that I wrote and I'm saying, I wrote that? No, okay, that sounds pretty good. All right, okay, I can go with that. But it's like it's part of you. It understands. So if that's the case, and I don't think that level of murder deserves just anger. It deserves a rage, not like hot anger, like in Maafa they say don't be in hot anger. That means that your anger is not controlled. You just going ballistic. Rage is something that is done when that anger is beyond anger. But because what was done caused that, and because it goes against what is right, then it should be done, but it's the correct thing to do. It is the right thing to do. It's the right place to be. It's the right thing to feel. To be so angry, it's unforgivable. They can never be forgiven. We can't conceive of that either. It can't be forgiven. What they have done. And forgiveness is based upon intent. Forgiveness is supposed to be based upon correction. Forgiveness is supposed to be based on ceasing whatever the behavior is. They've done none of that. They haven't stopped. I'm going to trust the truth of liars when they say, oh, we're sorry. So what they have done requires a righteous rage, which is going to move us to do something to correct it. It may involve creating a secret society. It may involve just having a vision that we have to work toward where our children are free. Okay. So we're seven generations people. That means what we do now, we do it based upon its impact. 7 generations down the road, it takes a lot of individualism and selfishness out of the equation. What they have done deserves nothing less than righteous rage. Okay. So, I mean, if you stepped on my shoe and pushed me, that doesn't deserve righteous rage. Okay, that may deserve settling, but that doesn't deserve me going off on you, all your relatives, your wife, your children, everybody who has your name, your entire city. It doesn't deserve that. What they have done for sane people deserves whatever it takes to keep them from doing that to anybody else. I remember this old guy who, it's amazing the number of old black people who are clear, but they know they're not going to be listened to. And some of them say, well, I shouldn't be saying it because, the Bible, blah, 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 blah. I shouldn't be saying or thinking these things, but they know. This old man I got into a discussion with him somehow about whether aliens created the pyramids or what have you. We were just playing around with words. And he stopped and he said, we have to stop them from exploring space because they're going to do the same thing to whoever they find out there that they did to us. And that was the end of the conversation. And I was just, I'm like stunned. Number one, this came out of his mouth. But number two, the logic of that, the clarity. We can't let them do this. So how do you stop them from doing that? That's the level of thinking that warriors need to be at. How do you stop them from doing this? How do you stop them from turning the world completely and totally into them so that we're cheering them as they go out and do that? How do we stop that? And righteous rage is part of that process. Because when you reach the point where you are righteously enraged, then that's where your thinking goes also, your planning goes also, your vision goes also. You gotta stop them from doing this. I don't want my grandson to become racialized. I don't want my granddaughter to think that if she wants to make money, she's got to become part of the porn industry. I don't want them to think that. So how do I stop that? Because I'm not big enough. Peer pressure makes me look like, nothing. So I have to change the structure of the world. I have to change the structure of how African people think. And when I do the best that I can do for that, then I can sleep at night. Because I'm only one person. You're only one person. The question is, did you do the best with your righteous rage that you could? Or did you just, let it sort of die out? No, this is supposed to, and that's what burns us out, but, sort of like that, what would you rather be, a happy slave or, whatever, or rebellious? Dead person. I'd rather be a rebellious dead person because we understand African thinking and the cycles. I'm not dead anyway. I think righteous rage is a critical concept for warriors to have, because it's one of those concepts that isn't small. It encompasses everything in terms of how we think and what we do. As long as when we say righteous, we're thinking logically given the situation that we're in. Okay, righteous rage isn't me going out in the street, the first white person I see because I'm mad at white people. That ain't gonna do anything to help me. That's not gonna do anything to help us. It can hurt us. Our righteous rage needs to be intelligent. It needs to be executed in an intelligent way. Negroes are traitors. Negroes pursue the interests of Europeans even without having to be told. They look for ways to make things comfortable for Europeans. So, and it doesn't be a conscious, I'm a Negro. It's just the way that you move. And there's a distinct difference, a slight difference between Negroes and lost souls. Negroes tend to be conscious of what they do. My whole way of thinking is, how do I hurt black folks? How do I help white folks? Lost souls may hurt us by default, but they're not like trying to do this. They just want to get along. It's like people who do this against us. The problem is that they are becoming, well, they've always been a visible majority, but they're becoming a stronger visible majority. So they're becoming the norm. What is the guy who worked with or led worked with the governor of Florida to change the textbooks and what's being taught? He's now in charge of, or part of the committee working to establish a black museum in Florida. So you know what that's going to be about, because he's a Negro. He's working against us. No matter what story, it can be the same story, but the interpretation is going to be of us through the eyes of Europeans. Every black man or black woman who's sleeping with a European isn't necessarily a Negro. They can be caught up in the madness, but you have some who systematically want to do that. I met one at the University of Chicago who married this white woman for the purpose of giving privilege to his children. He said because he could see what's coming. He could see the fall of African people in his mind, and he wanted his children to at least be given an opportunity to live. So that was why he was sleeping with this white female. Okay, so that to me is like conscious work. The person who at work does everything to undermine you in front of the white boss, that's a Negro. Okay? The cop who will give the European a warning, but slap you with a ticket and a lecture, that's the Negro. Okay, so it's not just because you're in a supervisory position. There was a postal worker here at our local post office. She retired a number of years ago, and I saw her because I would be at the post office pretty much every day. She treated the black folks like crap. Don't you know that you're supposed to put your zip code on here? That kind of stuff. White person come up to the line, hi, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while, blah, blah, blah. And when she left, and black folks knew what she was about. When she left, she came back one day, and I happened to be there. She came back, people will retire from a job or whatever, and they'll come back to visit every once in a while. She came back, and nobody would speak to her. Co-workers, none of the people in the office. She looked at me, I just looked back at her. Okay? So that to me is like Negro, but of course that's also to me the way Negroes need to be treated. They're inside the community. They use what I call the race card, where they will say in their minds and to you through their words that because I'm black like you, I can tell you how to think. I can tell you what to do. When I say race card, that's what I mean. They're the ones that if a race of black aliens came here and found out what Europeans had done to us, they will be the ones who would be hiding the Europeans, standing in front of the Europeans with guns against the aliens. That's them. Because we can see. I have known a few people who have become centered, who left being centered. To me, that's like the equivalent of a retired Black Panther. If we're not free, then retirement can't be part of the equation. So they were never there in the first place. But if you are truly centered, then you see clearly. It will help you in many ways to see who you can explain what to. Okay, so there are people who you're not going to waste your breath on because you know that that's a waste of your time. Being centered allows you to realize that this person's asking the same question over and over again, which means that they're not really trying to learn. They're just trying to pretend like they're doing something or be involved in it in some way. When you are satisfied with your life because you know that you're doing the work that you were called here to do to the best of your ability, that's a major part of being centered. Okay, so for us, it's not all of the books, it's all the right books. It's not being popular. So many folks, know our name, that's not it. It's being popular with the warriors. Where the warriors know who you are, and you know that they're there, you just can't see them all the time. Those are the things that make you do the opposite of crying. We traveled to Savannah a good number of years ago, and what we will tend to do is we'll try to set up a lecture with a vacation. And we'll do the lecture, and part of the money from the lecture will go for that vacation. We're going to take it in that same place. Some of the mamas invited us to do a lecture in Savannah. We went to Savannah, we reserved a car, and got a hotel room and all the rest of this, right? Get to the airport, and I'm walking around, and I don't see the agency. I don't know if it was Avis or Hertz or whatever. I didn't see their sign anywhere. So I'm walking around, and this brother walks up to me. He said, "Baba, what you doing?" And of course, say Baba to me, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, I'm looking for such and such an agency." And he said, "No, you come here." Gave us, upgrade twice. And I'm saying, he was clear. He knew who we were in such a way that it helped him in his life. It helped him to do the work for us. And for him, he saw it as I don't like to use the word debt, but he saw, what is the African proverb? A promise is a debt. That's the African proverb. So I would have done the same thing for him because we're family. It gets you that sense of understanding. We're family. Whether I call on you or not, I know that I can. And I know that you will respond in such a way that will help to solve whatever the problem is. Being centered is a select group. It's not the entire conscious community. In fact, I'm arguing it's getting to be a smaller and smaller part of the conscious community because you got so much confusion within the conscious community. Atlanta is like a perfect example of a confused conscious community. Okay, so what you find, it also defends you. It defends you from folks who want to be African. They know to stay away from you because they know that you're about character and they know you're not playing. Okay, so they know that your first judgment of an African person is their character because you're coming out of our tradition. In our tradition, the first judgment of a person was of their character. So it shields you in a way, not just from Europeans. When you're centered, they're not even in the picture. Okay, for me, Europeans, they don't even exist. They don't exist. I stay away from where they are. I don't even need to deal with them at all. They know after the first time, don't speak, because I'm not speaking back. And I understand there are people who are sent who have to because of the environment they're in or the situation or their job. I understand it. I'm just privileged to the point where I don't have to. Okay, I can stay in this house 24/7 and not see anybody but any eye. But it protects you more so for me from those Africans who want to play those conscious games, because they know that anybody who we know who knows what they're about has already told us or will warn us when they come. So we're protected by this circle, this community that understands the seriousness of what we're doing. I know you were asking about us, but we consider ourselves to be centered. So even though the circle is smaller, the circle is stronger and clear. About 6 years into Akaban Institute, the first 6 years were pretty tumultuous. We had students here who had been kicked out of the public school, fighting. You know, we didn't care. These are children. Talked back to mom. One boy, mom and dad were in prison. He was like in a rage, crying, hot tears every day. We had that. We had lots of that. We had more students than we should have had. And it was frustrating and it was draining on us because school didn't end at 3:30 or 6, whenever. It kept going. Then two things happened. Number one was, that was when K-Booga came out, my back went out. I had to crawl down the hallway and I kicked some students out of here. Said, I'm not doing this every day, I gotta heal. When we started, and interestingly at the same time, there were 2 other African-centered institutions in Atlanta who we didn't even know they were doing. They were kicking out students at exactly the same time we were. So something was going on spiritually, I would argue. The next year, we started out, I believe, with 6 or 7 students. All of them came from centered families. One of them was Islamic. One of them was Kemetic based. The rest of them, sort of a hodgepodge of different political orientations, but they were centered, they were clear. So we start teaching the school year, we go through the school year, and I'm pulling out, what we normally start out with. And they already know, that's centered. But we're all politically, we're all on the same plane. We're all on the same, we're all understanding the Maafa. He may not know the name Maafa, but he knows what it is. And so we are politically clear, and we're alive and we're kicking. And we know who the enemy is, and we know our work, and we know that we're here for a reason. That's a wonderful state to be in. To know who you are, to know clearly who you are, to know who, and more specifically, I would argue for us, because we study these particular individuals, to know who Francis Cress Welsing is, to know who Amos N. Wilson is, to know who John Harry Clark, to know who Doc Ben, and when you say Doc Ben, you say it like this is family. Baba Jake for Jedi Shem Sujihudi, Jacob Carruthers, because it's like, even though I've met this man one day for 5 minutes, that's like Baba, to be around people who are of righteous character, and anybody who steps in this direction that isn't in a righteous character, they get moved out. Crystal clear. Mama Rumba, okay, and anybody who's anywhere near her, and she'll sit there and she'll say, why are you talking to him? Are you sure you need to communicate with that person? Okay. Why did you take the picture with him? She's like a regulator. That's centeredness in a way that most people can't imagine. They intentionally built a school facility there with a playground between the school and her. So in her old age, trying to be quiet, have some peace, every day, all day long, she's in the middle of noise. So they do so. India and I were talking the other day about Malcolm, how they don't stop with Malcolm. They killed all the boys. They did the same thing with Chancellor Williams. His son, Chancellor Williams' grandson was in the same, son or grandson, was in the same prison facility in the same wing as Malcolm's, same time. They didn't know each other, but they were in the same space at the same time. That's a major part of that centered thing. When you have chosen, because everybody does that except for us. We'll pick it. Anybody who they throw at us is an ancestor. Anybody who Europeans approved of is an ancestor. Anybody who brought us perversion was an ancestor. And an elder in the community, he's transitioned now. He had me cracking up doing a libation. You know, so we laughing doing a libation. He had me cracking up doing a libation because he was really eloquent. He was a truck driver, and he came and he did a lecture on trucking to the students one time, and he do the libation, and he was real entertaining, you know, but he was real crystal clear on being African, and he called for one of the boys to come up, and he gave him water, the cup, and what water was left, and he said, "You go pour this out on the sidewalk for those ancestors who are African, but we want them to know we don't want them in here. And that water will not fertilize, won't water anything." So we're the only people, the center, who doesn't call out the names of people whose names don't deserve to be called. So we are clear on those people. So anybody, there might be names that I call, might be names that you call that I don't know, or names that I call that you don't know. But there's this core. And even though I don't know the name of that person you call, I know that they deserve to be part of us, or you wouldn't be calling the name. But there's that core that we know. We know who these people are. And the closer you get to the center, then the more you know. So you're gonna know Murmbani, you're gonna know John Henry Clark, you're gonna know Chancellor Williams, you're gonna know Francis Cress Wilson, you're gonna know Ayikwe Arma. You're gonna know these people by name, and you will have ranked them in your mind according to their level of importance. All of them are important, but in terms of the importance of study, in terms of important, listening to their lectures, but particularly reading. And the vast majority of the people who I know, who are in the center, they read. They study. And whether they're locked up or out here, and these are the two comparative, they read. This guy sent me this letter. He must have been 30 something, maybe 40 something. Sent me a letter from prison. He was always asking questions of clarity, because he would have read this and that point on page such and such. This paragraph isn't making sense, and he sends me this letter, and he says, "I need you to help me to understand Ramanuja Rugu." He said, "I've only read it 8 times." And I'm like, what? You asking me, you studied this book. You had time to sit down and really digest, study, think about this book. And I think at that time I had read it maybe 2, maybe 3 times, but so in there, he's clear. He knows exactly what's going on. And we need to be, even though I don't think anybody wants to be in there, we need people in there too. They've removed us from the schools from the early 80s through the 90s. We watched them systematically move center scholars from every college and university, except those who were super tenured, across this country. We watched them remove them from their positions, from the schools. And about this time, I believe that Jacob Carruthers was talking about intellectual maroons. It's not you're not getting kicked out since you made the decision. I'm not dealing with this. I can't teach the way I need to. I can't talk to the young folks where I need to talk to the young folks. So we know that center is something special. It's powerful. It scares the living daylights out of Uruguay. It scares them to no end. We need to be aware they know who we are. So our job is to deliver the word so that warriors can act on it without a visible connection, so they can't be connected to us. So when I talk to folks about secret societies, I tell them, I can't do that. They know who I am. And then every one of you are going to be, and I know young black folks are intelligent, so I know somebody's listening. Somebody's clear on the Maafa. But they're just not, going around telling everybody or trying to make everybody understand. So somebody's doing this work. But at the same time, somebody's have to put the idea out there. You all need to get together, form you some secret society. That's the foundation of successful empire, successful whatever. You all need to do this, or we're going to lose. Okay? Young folks lead the revolutions. We forget that. The young folks lead the revolutions. Soweto, that's a perfect example. Young folks lead the revolutions. Old folks comfortable, secure. They got their vested, interests. Young folks, they don't have the same fears, the same apprehensions. They're not concerned about a lot of the baloney old folks are concerned about for no reason. They don't have that, and they know right from wrong, whether they are involved in wrong or not. They know right from wrong. They just don't feel like it's profitable or beneficial, or what have you. They know right from wrong. They know their people are being destroyed. They know this. They might not be able to articulate it. They might not even be able to consciously explain it to themselves. But they know something's not right. This is how, for me, our young folk know that something is wrong. They can't articulate it. I came out the military, I got an apartment, and the guy next to me was trying to befriend me. He was a cool guy, tried to befriend me. And went to his apartment, we were talking, and I noticed there was really no furnishings in his apartment. But he had this like 110-gallon fish tank. No gravel, no air filter, no plants, fake or real, and this eel-like thing in there. It was probably maybe, about 2 feet long. About maybe that fat around. And it's just kind of swimming around a little bit. Took out one of the goldfish. He dropped it in the water. And the goldfish was swimming, and then it stopped. It froze exactly where it was at. You could see the gills moving. You see the fins adjusting to make sure he stayed in the same spot. He froze. He knew he was dead. He knew it. And the eel slowly but surely came up, snatched him. Our young folk, in the opposite way, they know something that's wrong. They know something that's horribly wrong. They're trying to party their way out of it. They're trying to eat their way out of it. They're trying to marry their way out of it. But they know something is horribly wrong. Gray race isn't going to solve the problem. There's not enough, it will take too long. And I don't think that black women are going to be willing every 2-3 years to be having a baby so that we can, have this done within, a few hundred years. They know something is horribly wrong. But as Darren Clark said, we need to identify those who are willing to follow the route, the African route. We need to train them. However, I would argue, in addition to that now, because of, COINTELPRO's gone nowhere. Because of when an animal is most threatened with death, it fights the hardest. It claws at anything, like a person who's drowning. They'll take you under. Europeans know what's happening. Andrew Hacker in Two Nations talked about how Europeans are trying to befriend Africans because they know it's over. They know it's over. They know that there are going to be some who get it. So we have to be careful when we see someone who is clear to let them do their thing on their own without trying to turn them into one of our disciples or what have you. Because once we do that, then they're going to identify them as part of the problem. And they're going to keep their eye. They have our taxes as resources to put a man on that man. So we have to be very, very, very careful with that.